Welcome to today's Explainer. If you've ever sat in the pews before Mass, just kind of waiting for things to start, you've probably found your eyes wandering over to that mysterious closed door off to the side of the altar, right? The one the priest eventually walks out of. Well, today we are finally opening that door. We're going to look closely at the features of the sacristy, checking out the specific items inside, and uncovering their deep liturgical significance.
Which really begs the question, is the sacristy just a storage room? I mean, it's a super common misconception that this space is basically just a glorified closet. A place where extra chairs, old church bulletins, maybe a random broom, and a half-empty box of offering envelopes are just shoved out of sight. But, as we're about to see, the reality of what actually happens behind that closed door is way more structured and honestly incredibly significant.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. Inside the hidden room.
Consider this explainer your exclusive backstage tour of the liturgy's staging area. The way this room is organized, it's not just left up to whatever the local priest or parish staff happens to prefer, not at all. It is strictly governed by ancient official rules. In fact, the general instruction of the Roman Missal, which is often just called the GIRM, literally dictates the setup. It specifically mentions the preparation of sacred vestments right here. And it identifies the sacristan as the one who carefully arranges the liturgical books, the vestments, and everything else necessary for the celebration of Mass. So yeah, it's a highly regulated staging ground.
Moving on to our next stop, Section 2. Sacred threads and linens.
When you first walk into a sacristy, the very first thing you'll probably notice are these absolutely massive wardrobes. And they aren't just your standard clothing cupboards. Inside, there is an incredible array of vestments. We're talking albs, stoles, chasubles for the priests, dalmatics for the deacons, and copes for those really special ceremonies. And they're all meticulously organized by the liturgical colors of the church calendar. So you've got white, red, green, violet, and rose. The GIRM requires all of these to be perfectly prepped right here for the clergy, way before the church bells even ring.
Now, beyond the garments worn by the clergy, you have the sacred linens. A perfect example is the purificator, which is a specific sacred linen used to purify the chalice during the Eucharistic celebration. You'll also find corporals, palls, and lavabo towels in here. But listen, these are not just ordinary tablecloths or kitchen hand towels, because these linens come into direct contact with the Eucharist. Their care, their handling, and how they're washed are tied to a profound sense of reverence. They are cared for and stored with absolute precision.
All right, up next, Section 3. The tools of worship.
So, if the vestments are the uniform, these next items are basically the active ingredients of the Mass, just waiting on standby. We've got the sacred vessels, the chalice, the paten, the ciborium, the piex, and the monstrance. Interestingly, the GIRM actually gives particular honor to the chalice and the paten specifically because of their direct role in offering the Eucharistic elements. That fact alone proves this room isn't just a closet, it's directly connected to the Eucharist itself. It's almost like a sacred vault.
And then you have things like the thurible, a metal censer used alongside an incense boat and charcoal for incensation. Now, if you've ever wondered why a sacristy can look incredibly busy and honestly smell a little bit like a campfire right before a solemn Mass, well, this is exactly why. Preparing that metal censer with burning, red-hot charcoal and getting the incense boat ready is a totally hands-on, time-sensitive task. It takes dedicated space and super careful handling right up until the procession actually begins.
All of this builds into a much wider array of essential tools. The sacristy houses everything. You've got the official liturgical books, like the Roman missals, lectionaries, and gospels, containing all the church's ancient texts. There's the processional cross that actually leads the congregation. You've got candles and candlesticks, cruets for the water and wine, the lavabo set, which is the basin, water, and towel for washing the priest's hands, and of course, holy water and the aspergillum. Everything grouped together in this space serves as a highly visible sign or a practical tool for the official celebration. Literally nothing is in this room by accident. Which brings us to Section 4, where sacred meets practical. Now, what's really interesting here is that a sacristy has this fascinating dual nature, where profound reverence sits literally right next to mundane, everyday maintenance. Take this completely unique architectural feature, the sacrarium. At first glance, it just looks like a normal sink, but it is absolutely not a general-purpose drain. It is a special fixture traditionally located in the sacristy, and it's used exclusively for pouring out water from the purification of those sacred vessels and linens we just talked about. That water actually goes directly into the earth. It's a perfect reflection of the Church's broader practice of treating sacred things with ultimate reverence, right down to the actual plumbing.
And this contrast is just so striking. On one hand, you have this intensely sacred preparation, the chalices, the purificators, the sacrarium itself. But then you literally turn around and you see ordinary maintenance, everyday stuff. Desks, wall calendars, scheduling keys, storage drawers, and plain old cleaning supplies. The sacristy is very much a working space. It is basically a command center where the most sacred traditions and highly practical logistics are managed side by side.
Now, one quick point of clarification here. While we're exploring a fully stocked, perfectly equipped room today, it is not a universal blueprint for every single church. For instance, a massive cathedral might have multiple sprawling vestment rooms and highly specialized climate-controlled storage vaults. But a small rural chapel? It might just have a really modest wooden cabinet with a few basic vestments and vessels. So what we are mapping out today is the anatomy of a well-equipped sacristy rather than a strict architectural mandate that applies to every single building.
All right, let's step back and look at the big picture. Section 5, the ministry of preparation.
Because at the end of the day, all of this requires a human touch. This is an unseen ministry. Think about it. Long before the very first parishioner even walks through the church doors to find a seat in the pew, the sacristan is already hard at work. Vestments are being laid out, the ribbons and the heavy Roman missals are checked and perfectly set to the correct pages, vessels are polished and staged, the candles are arranged, and the incense is prepped. It's this quiet, continuous, behind-the-scenes orchestration that actually makes the public liturgy possible in the first place. And that brings us to the core thesis of this whole explainer. Why does all of this matter? Simply put, the worship of God deserves our best preparation. That is the true heart of the sacristy. This meticulous organization, the strict, unwavering adherence to the GIRM rules, the ultra-careful laundering of the linens, it all matters because it directly points toward what happens out there, in the sanctuary. It ensures that the people gathering to worship are met with a sense of true beauty, order, and deep reverence.
Which leaves us with one final thought. What will you see the next time that door opens? Seriously, the next time you see a priest or deacon emerge right before Mass starts, I challenge you to look just a little past the doorframe. Remember the massive wardrobes, the sacrarium, the glowing charcoal, and most importantly, remember the entire ministry of quiet, dedicated preparation that happens behind the scenes every single Sunday. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.